I'm writing my senior thesis at Princeton on virtual reality storytelling, as Matt said. I'm an English major, and although I come from a family that loves tech and video games, shout out to my brothers and sisters who know what a JRPG is. Woo! I don't know that much about technology, although I'm learning. But along came a hedgehog, this hedgehog. His name is Henry, and today is his birthday. But because he's so spiky, he doesn't have many friends. I visited his house. He let me look around the walls, and I saw pictures of him trying to make friends, but to little success. In reality, I looked something like this, or this, but really more like this. When I visited Henry's home, I was standing in the office space of the Oculus Store studio in San Francisco. I was wearing a virtual reality headset, a head-mounted display, like opaque ski goggles, and headphones, as you can see. And I had sensors around the room that watched me and allowed me to walk around in a small circle in Henry's home. Virtual reality, or VR technologies, provide the opportunity to be in another place. Because of digital capabilities like stereoscopy, which creates the illusion of a 360-degree image before your eyes, and head or rotational tracking, which allows you to look around in a virtual space, you feel present in a virtual environment, as if that setting is real. VR also provides the opportunity to tell stories. Like here, in the River Studios, riding shotgun with Colette Davis, who's a professional race car driver who introduces you to the world of the sport. Davis takes you through a car repair shop and her preparation techniques for a race, as well as in this scene, you get to actually go on a racetrack with her and experience zooming past her competitors. Or here, in Bible VRX's Life of Moses, an intimate take on the ancient story of a man who answered a divine call to free an enslaved people. Viewers walk alongside of Moses, an insecure shepherd who, according to the biblical account, was called by God to liberate the Israelites from slavery in ancient Egypt. And viewers gain a profound perspective on the classic tale. Or here, Alchemy Labs Job Simulator, where in the year 2050, robots have eliminated the need for office work. And you take on the role of a visitor to a museum about jobbing, which is the robot's interpretation of corporate employment. You get to reenact logging into a desktop computer, deleting emails, and throwing paper airplanes to bother your friends. In Job Simulator, you also get to hold virtual reality controllers, which for the HTC Vive headset looks something like this. And with them, you also get to type on the keyboard, shred some paper, and down a mug of ready-made coffee. For these stories, and any visual story, it's important that a viewer focus on specific imagery at a specific time in order to follow the narrative's progression. For example, to go back to the scene in the race car with in Riding Shotgun with Colette Davis, a VR producer might want you to look at Davis's expression at a given moment, or maybe out the window at an adjacent car. But a viewer in virtual reality is put in the middle of what's called a 360-degree image space, which is the virtual world that completely encircles the viewer. And they can only look at a certain part of the screen called a field of view. And like human vision, it's probably somewhere between a third to a fourth of the 360-degree shot. For this scene, given field of view, would be this, which is just out the front windshield of Davis's car. So how do you get your viewer to look at the right thing at the right time in order to follow your story? Early cinema had a similar problem. Some of the first short films solely focused on the shock effect of the seemingly real motion picture, such as the Lumiere brothers' The Arrival of a Train at La Ciotat Station, which was just a train zooming right at the camera. And it said that audience members fled their seats in fear because of how real it felt. Other early films merely recorded a stage play or used a very theatrical style, such as Méliès's A Trip to the Moon, which detailed an ensemble cast's fantasy voyage into outer space and was composed of shots, which meant that the camera was just looking at one angle for longer than 3 or 4 minutes, today's standard being about a minute. A film grammar had to be established over decades that set standards for things like cuts, shots, and sequences that utilized film's unique potential, as well as allowed audience members to grasp the key aspects of a story without having to show them every detail. That language is just now being established for virtual reality. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to give you a window into some of the most important and powerful techniques that are emerging. First, you need to orient or acclimate your viewer to the virtual world. In the Oculus Story Studio's first film called Lost, the first thing you see in a headset is a firefly named Phi in front of you. And as Phi begins to flit around, your eyes follow his movements, and you discover your headset's head or rotational tracking ability. Then slowly, a dark forest materializes around you. There's Phi in the middle there. And you're given about 40 seconds to look around and feel settled in the virtual setting. Then finally, the call to story comes, which in Lost happens in 2 ways. And the call to story is the cue of the actual narrative, the plot beginning. Here, you see title credits appear on the screen, as well as a bird swooshes past you into the forest to denote the action beginning. Lost title credits are an example of using text on the screen, which can be utilized for narration or overt guidance given to viewers in order to get them to look at something specific. Arrows on a virtual screen pointing to something, to a character or an object, or just a voice in the audio telling you to look a certain way is also an example of narration. Lost Phi the Firefly is also an example of lighting, a tactic VR producers borrow from traditional film and theater, where a specific, again, character or object is highlighted by intentional illumination. In Reverie Studios' depiction of Dickens' classic novel and play A Christmas Carol, Scrooge, the story's protagonist, whose heart is gradually warmed to the idea of Christmas, is highlighted here by actual stage lighting. And as viewers focus on his face and see his horrified look somewhere above their heads, they're led to turn around. And as they do, the rest of the lights come up, and they see the ghost of Christmas future, a key character in Scrooge's transformation. Next, spatialized sound is the concept of audio that when you hear it, you can tell where it's coming from in a 360-degree image space, which can be a subconscious way even to direct user attention. In the emblematic group's solemn journalism piece about domestic violence named Kia, you're told the story of a woman, her family, and her boyfriend who threatens to shoot her if she leaves him. Each character's voice is clearly linked to their location in that the virtual space around you, so you instinctively look at who's talking, and it helps you follow the suspenseful plot. Over the course of a story, VR producers, they're putting their narrative together, can actually choose to pause the plot until you, the viewer, are looking at the right thing. A technique known as time-delayed action, which is enabled by virtual reality headsets' ability to sense where you're looking. What's more, in what are called gaze-based narratives, such as Nick Pittom's Coloss VR, a fantasy story about a fisherman who steals a rock giant's crystal fuel, the action of the story actually moves to where the viewer spends the most time looking. So in this scene, here we go. If I spent a lot of time looking at this mountain here, when I watch the virtual story, the fisherman would actually appear more like here. And vice versa, if I spent my time looking at these rocks, he might appear slightly to the right, which means that every viewing of Coloss VR is actually going to be slightly different, not only in my experience of it, but in the actual setting of the story in the 360-degree image space. But perhaps the most striking technique for virtual reality storytelling is the idea of acknowledgement, or the narrative addressing the viewer. This has most often happened by a virtual reality character doing this. Here, Henry the Hedgehog breaks the fourth wall of media communication, or acknowledges the viewer's presence by looking at you. Because of virtual reality's inherent sense of presence, you, the viewer, feel like you are there. And because of that, it's very powerful if the narrative or the environment acknowledges you, even if they call you a different name. And if you're doing the action, or just if you're following the story, it's important that the VR community takes seriously the types of situations and content that they are putting you in. In Epic Games' Bullet Train VR, where users hold controllers and shoot cyborg invaders, Epic Games actually toned the explicit violence of this experience down because of how real it felt. Although I won't lie, it did feel pretty good to shoot down those robot bad guy invaders. The Oculus Rift, one of the 3 premier virtual reality headsets announced, all of which will be coming out in 2016, ships to consumers in 2 days. As producers, artists, journalists, storytellers, and educators continue to get their hands on them, we have the opportunity to set the standard for the language of narrative techniques that will be used, as well as the sorts of stories that will be told. Ultimately, virtual reality is not about a technology, but it's about the expansion of the way humans create and relate to stories. I invite you all to explore the virtual world with me.